You guys are going to be 11th graders in U.S. history, and we're studying immigration in Ellis Island. And today we're looking at the medical exams that were done on Ellis Island. Okay, so some of you, when I came around, got a piece of paper with a letter on it. Can you raise your hand if you did? Okay, what do you think that letter means?
What?
Well, each letter corresponds to a different ailment that you could have when you entered Ellis Island that the medical examiners might think would make you either unfit to enter at the moment or completely unfit to enter at all. And remember to fill out your worksheets while you're at this. These were chalk marks which were written onto the clothing of immigrants to signal if they had any medical ailments. As you can see, there was a whole array of them. Who had B? You have a back problem. And they would often observe that just by the way you were standing. What they did at Ellis Island, they called it the 6-minute physical. The immigrants would walk up the steps into the registry room, and doctors would watch them from above, and they would observe how they walked, their breathing, if they were doing anything weird that may make them seem senile. And then they would examine their hair, their eyes, their face, and their necks, and then they would pass them on. So, who had the letter CT? That means you have trachoma, which is an eye disease. When it's very contagious and it's very disgusting and you'll probably go blind, but you would not be allowed into the country because they didn't have a cure for it, so you're going home. Who had P? That's physical and lungs. And who had X? You have a suspected mental defect, so they're going to send you for testing. But immigrants were examined by public health service doctors, and around 10% of immigrants were given these chalk marks. Sometimes the chalk marks, it just meant they were sick, and they would go to the Ellis Island Hospital, which is actually one of the best hospitals in the country at the time, because they embraced germ theory, and they would get well, and then they'd be allowed to continue on to the U.S. Other ones, like people with trachoma, would just be going home. So, we have a story. It should be the next page in your packet. Next page. It's called The Memory Coat by Elvira Woodruff. It's a children's book. You're not going to read the whole thing because of time, but this story is about a girl, Rachel, and her family's journey to America from Russia. With her family traveled her cousin named Grisha. And Grisha's parents had died, and all he had left with them was this ratty old coat that he was very attached to because his mother sewed it the winter before she died. So, if you guys could read, we can go like paragraph by paragraph if you want. Adam, you can start.
And so it was that this family made its way into a long line of people to the place called Ellis Island. And so it was that Grisha's tattered coat made its way with it.
Grisha and Rachel held tight to their grandmother's skirts as they were swept along in the crowd.
As the din of thousands of strange voices echoed through the large hall, they couldn't help wondering and worrying about the inspectors who watched them. Would they pass the inspections? Would they be sent back to Russia? Would the family be separated forever?
They waited in one line, then another. To still their fears, Rachel and Grisha continued their game.
Once there lived a magical bird with golden feathers, Rachel began. Grisha took out a pencil and a piece of paper he found and laid down a plaster pillar as he drew.
As she told her story, Rachel spread her arms and pretended to fly, but she suddenly lost her balance and fell against Grisha. The two tumbled down and knocked Bubba's basket beside them. Rachel wasn't hurt, but Grisha scratched his eye on the basket's lid.
By the time his turn came to be examined, Grisha's injured eye looked quite red and irritated. When the doctor lifted Grisha's eyelid with a button hook, Grisha cried out in pain. Taking a quick look, the doctor marked her with a large letter E in chalk on the back of Grisha's coat.
Rachel felt her Bubba's hand tightening around her own as everyone began to talk at once. Something was wrong. Something was happening to Grisha. He hadn't passed the inspection. He was going to be sent back to Russia.
His eye is healthy. It was just a scratch. Rachel's father pleaded to the inspector. but the inspector had stepped away. The doctor could not understand Russian or Yiddish, and Rachel's father could not speak a word of English. So the doctor just shook his head, and the chalk E remained. The children were sent to sit on the bench and wait. Why won't they let Grisha stay? Rachel's younger sister asked.
And
Maybe it's this raggedy old coat, said another sister. You should have listened to Bubba and let her make you a new one.
I won't let them send you back, Rachel whispered to Grisha.
Suddenly, Rachel had an idea. She quickly pulled off Grisha's coat and turned it inside out, exposing the beautiful wool from his mother's coat.
Now the dreaded chalk mark was hidden from view, and Rachel's father was able to walk Grisha over to another line where he was examined once more. This doctor was kinder and more patient. He understood Yiddish. He took a closer look at Grisha's eye and saw it was only a scratch. So he kept his chalk in his pocket, and Grisha passed through with the rest of the family.
Such a one, Rachel's father cried, as he lifted Rachel and kissed her cheeks. Everyone was laughing and crying at once.
Bubba hugged Rachel and Grisha tight. You were right, Grisha, Bubba said. This coat of yours is very special. Your mama's touch will be with you for a very long time. Not only here on the outside, but here, she said, tapping Grisha's chest, on the inside, the most important place of all.
Now, so many winters later, the cousins whispered stories can be heard no more. But in a land far from the icy Russian winds, Grisha's tattered coat has been passed down to his children and to his grandchildren. And here it remains to tell a bigger story. For in that worn bit of wool, held together by caring stitches, are the memories of a mother's love and of a family's journey made so long ago.
Okay. We are going to skip the little questions on memory code that are on the first page, because I think you guys are old enough to understand it. But there's a couple things we can learn from this story. Early in the book that you didn't read, it explains why they left Russia, and then it explains their journey and the hardships they faced on it. But what we're going to focus on now is what it felt like to be at Ellis Island. And remember to take note of a lot of his sensory and emotional experiences of the characters for the project you're doing after this, which is a journal entry pretending to be an immigrant at Ellis Island. So, what were the sensory and emotional experience of Rachel's family when they arrived at Ellis Island? What do you think they were feeling? Braden?
They were probably scared because they didn't know English really, and they didn't understand exactly what was happening, except that they were going to be inspected in some fashion. Like when the E got drawn on the back of Grisha's back, like they didn't know what it stood for really, probably, but they just knew that there was something wrong. So.
Why do you think that Ellis Island officials wanted to keep these people out of the country? Or people that they thought had suspected ailments?
So they wouldn't spread?
That's right. Do you think that do you think that immigrants were often unfairly treated in the way that they couldn't speak English and they were often not provided with interpreters and mistakes like this could happen? Do you think people at Ellis Island were at fault for things like this? Accidental?
Well, you can't be expected to have an interpreter for every country because the United States was having all of Eastern Europe and Western Europe and Asia, probably not in Ellis Island. They were just pouring in, so being able to get a translator over to each person when it's necessary, you can understand how that'd be difficult, especially 100 years ago or whatever.
Julie?
I also think having hundreds, maybe thousands of people a day, it's probably hard to do an accurate job, checking people over. So can't really blame them for how many people they have to look at every day.
That sheer volume of people coming in, they would often have more than one boat arrive at a time. And that sheer volume is what led to 6-second inspections, because they didn't have time to accurately inspect other people.